Hey guys, this is AI Gaming 1776 and we're here to talk about just how viable it is to play The Division in 4K in 2016. Now I know a lot of people might say, well AI, The Division, that's a very demanding game. Of course it's not going to be easy to play that in 4K, even with a Titan XP, so why are we having this discussion? Well, here's the thing. Nvidia has been promising us 4K since 2014 at least, maybe even 2013. Alright, and here it is, late 2016, it's September 2016, it's been 2 years, and I want to know just how viable is it to play a reasonably demanding game in 4K with a single GPU. What does that look like? And that's what we're going to talk about in this video, and we're going to show you. This is a live demonstration. Alright, it would be very easy for me to do Overwatch or pick some kind of game that runs well in 4K, but let's be honest. By the time you pay the kind of money it takes to have hardware to run 4K and to buy a TV or a monitor that is 4K, do you really want to be limited to just a handful of games? Really? Don't get me wrong, Overwatch, for a lot of people that's some addictive fun, but do you really want to be limited? So that's why The Division, that's why I'm doing this video. Alright, in the upper right hand corner we have Afterburner, and the top line gives you the GPU temperature, which that will go up. It gives you the utilization, which should go up. It gives you the fan speed, which probably won't go up because I locked it at 80%. The next line, not next line, but the next number, the 2012 number, all the way in the upper right hand corner, that is the core speed. That will go down as the video goes on because this is Pascal. We're using a GTX 1080. The next line, that's D3, D11, that gives you your frame rate. The line under that is MEM, that means VRAM basically. We're using 3.8 gigs of VRAM and we are at 5054 megahertz with, I believe that's an effective speed of right at 11,000 megahertz. And then CPU is at 59, 58, 60 degrees. Then the utilization is next to that. Oh, I'm getting attacked over here. And then system RAM is under there, just under 7 gigabytes. Wow. How about I just go into cover right in front of them? You know what? I'm going to let them kill me. That's probably going to be the quickest thing to do right now. Come on. You kill me. There you go. There you go. Then I'll spawn at a safe house. And we'll go from there. Alright, so in this video, I'm going to show you... Oh yeah, I got to press the A button. I'm going to show you the settings that I'm using. Alright? There are some caveats here to make this play in 4K. If you notice, the 59.9 frames per second... and now it's 60, 59.9, 60, going back and forth. That's a pretty good frame rate for 4K, and it probably looks promising, as it should. Alright, it should seem a little bit promising. 60 frames per second in 4K with a single GPU, I mean, that does sound good. But there are some caveats, alright? So as a matter of fact, why don't I just let the cat out of the bag right now and show you the settings, okay? I wanted to do a demonstration first. That's what I would usually do in a video like this, but since we have so much to unpack in this video, I think I'll just show you the settings right now so we can just, again, let that cat out of the bag. Alright, so video, as you can see, it is full screen. It is 3840 by 2160. It is 59.94 hertz for the refresh rate because this is a television. It's a Samsung... I'm not quite sure the model number. It's a 6300. It's like a UK 6300. Best Buy sells it. It's actually on a Labor Day sale right now. Alright, graphics. Alright, so here's where things get real. VSync mode is on auto. Yes, I could turn VSync off, and as a matter of fact, I will, just to show you guys the frame rate we can get up to at these settings. It's not going to be high, but we'll see. We'll see what it is. With VSync off, though, you will have screen tearing when you're using a television. A G-Sync monitor would actually be preferable to a television if we're going to be real, but I think a lot of people who are going to game in 4K right now are going to be in a position where they're using a television, because to be honest with you, TV's pretty cheap compared to an actual monitor. Like this TV right here is pretty cheap, and you can get even cheaper still. I mean, you can get $300–400 4K TVs right now. So there's a bunch of bad guys coming, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out of the way because this game does not let you actually pause. I thought when I had respawned I actually thought what would happen would be it would take me to a safe house, but that didn't happen. I hope you guys don't mind the conversational tone of this video. It's, I don't know, I know it's after 1 in the morning. I just tried to find my phone, I can't reach it. It's after 1 in the morning, and I've spent hours, I don't even know how many hours, testing this in 4K, and I'm at a point where I want to make the video while this is fresh in my mind. Alright, so let's go into graphics. Custom quality, VSync off for now, frame rate limit off, shadow quality low. If I'm honest, I would like to go to high. High is the next option up, but if you want the 60 frames per second, you're going to want to stick with low. Plus, on this TV, you see, I'm used to BenQ monitors, and my BenQ monitors have a lot of options when it comes to tweaking the picture. I mean, a lot. Even though a lot of BenQ monitors are TN panels, I still make the picture look really good because BenQ has so many options. Well, this TV, it's got a fair amount of options for television, but not quite like the BenQ as far as some of the things that I want. I say all that to say, when the shadow quality was on high, the picture was a little too dark, and just going into the TV's brightness and contrast and everything, that was not dealing with the darkness well enough. So shadow quality is on low, and that yields better performance. And then in the case of this television with this computer hooked up to it, it does help combat how dark everything looked. Alright, shadow resolution medium, spot shadow count medium, spot shadow resolution medium, contact shadows all high. That is very important because you can have all high, all low, sun low, off. Alright, all high is the only thing that looks good out of all those choices, and it does affect frame rate. So, see, I like that. I like my picture to have a certain amount of contrast, to have a certain amount of pop. And that pop and that contrast is not there unless contact shadows are all high. Again, that's on this television. Now, you can get yourself a PC monitor, and maybe you've got yourself a BenQ 4K, although they don't make a gaming one right now, but maybe you've got yourself a BenQ 4K, or maybe even the Acer does a good job letting you adjust things. But in my situation right now, contact shadows all high, pretty important if I want contrast. Alright, so post effects AA is on medium, SMAA times 1 medium. Alright, temporal AA is on stabilization, because as you notice in that upper right hand corner, we were at, I believe, 2025 megahertz for the clock speed on the GPU, and that's already come down to 2000. Alright, so if you know anything about graphics cards, the lower your clock speed goes down, the lower your performance could go down. Now, Pascal is a tricky little animal because sometimes a Pascal card at 1920 megahertz, really like 1925, 1927, something like that, can perform just as well as it does at 2000 megahertz when it wants to. But then there's other times where it's definitely performing better at 2000 megahertz. It all goes down to some power saving features in Pascal, and that's its own can of worms. Anyway, with that said, we're probably going to get down to 1987 megahertz as this GPU gets warmer throughout the course of this video. And as a result of that, once we go under 2000 megahertz, and yes, I have overclocked this card, it's just not a fantastic overclocker. It's not an outright bad overclocker, but it's not fantastic. I mean, the fan speed's at 80%. And at 66 degrees, which is not a high temperature for a GPU, and this computer's been on for like at least 4 straight hours right now, probably longer. I've been working on this part 4 hours straight, and I was working on it before then. So anyway, 66 degrees, that's not bad. In the Division, it's a hot game, but it's going to get warmer. The GPU will get warmer. The speed will go down. So the temporal AA stabilization, I chose stabilization because I was hoping it would help with some of the jitteriness the game had. It had a slight amount of jitteriness. Let me gloss over something real quick. Alright, sharpen image 100%, particle detail low, enable wind affected snow, no, volumetric fog medium, that's as low as it'll go. I can't go any lower. Reflection quality low, I actually would like to turn the volumetric fog off if I'm honest. And I think that would help with a lot of things, but I can't turn it off. Alright, so reflection quality low, local reflection quality medium, subsurface scattering no, anisotropic filtering times 8, parallax mapping high, ambient occlusion off, depth of field off, object detail 100%. I did that, and you'll see why in a minute. I did that for a reason. Object detail 100%, that's the detail level. And that would normally affect frame rate. But we'll talk about why I put that at 100% in a minute, alright? Extra streaming distance is at 100% because I'm hoping that's going to cut down on some pop-in. Chromatic aberration, yes. Neutral lighting, no. Lens flare, yes. Vignette effect, yes. Alright, so object detail is at 100% because, and if I was playing in 1440p or 1080p, I would normally have that anywhere between 68 and 80%, alright, if I'm honest. But I have it at 100% because, you may have noticed earlier, I skipped over this, resolution scale is at 85%. And that's my only option, right? I wish I could have 95 or even 90, but you can have 100, you can have 85, you can have 75, 50. See, that's very interesting. You got a 15% drop, a 10% drop from that, then a 25% drop from that. So resolution scaling is at 85, all right? Now, why is that? Well, let's get out of here. Woo! We're in the 70s for the frame rate, son. Alright, there's some bad guys over there. Mad screen tearing, though. 80 frames per second. That's actually pretty decent. If you had a G-Sync monitor, you could be enjoying that. Now, we just went down to 68 frames per second. Just went down to 70. Let me see if I can fast travel. There's enemies nearby, but I would like to go to an area that I'm pretty familiar with. Alright? So when it comes to assessing the performance of the Division, I've got a few general areas that I go to. The only reason I was actually in that area that I just was is because in this game, on my server and everything, that's where the sunlight was, right? And then look at this. We're in the middle of fog. That looks terrible. All right, 80%, not 80%, 80 frames per second, 72, 73. That is not bad. But let's see what it looks like when we get into this area up here. Alright, it's down the street and around the corner. I could fast travel and it would probably take just as much time. It's literally, see this building to my right? It's at the end of this building. It's a long building. This is your headquarters at the start of the game. Alright, so gaming in 4K, how viable is it? Well, I've got Mankind Divided, Deus Ex, Mankind Divided, and I played that in 4K and I turned a lot of the settings down. I didn't turn every single setting down, but I mean down, right? Like I even turned textures down to medium. And, well actually, hold on, I had textures down to high. Don't quote me on the medium yet. I've not reloaded the game with medium. But a lot of stuff turned down or turned off. And it was only like, with VSync off mind you, it was only like 45 frames per second. So, and it would go down to 32 with no VSync on, alright? And with no resolution scaling gimmicks or anything. So, Mankind Divided, it looked okay, but it didn't play very well, right? Like if you remember what it's like to have a 750 Ti playing a 1080p game about a year and a half ago, that's kind of like what it was. You know, it was, you got to turn some stuff down, and it still might not hold 60 frames per second. So, I don't know. What else have I tried so far? So, I've been working on The Division because The Division is one of my favorite games to test with, right? Because if you can make The Division run well and look good, then you're doing all right, okay? Like a GTX 1070 is the bare, not 1070, a GTX 970 is the bare minimum when it comes to Maxwell. To do 1080p, play this game, make it look good, make it run well. Like a 960, Maxwell 960, that would do like 45 to 60 frames per second in 1080p on the high preset. But you get yourself a GTX 970, you do some custom settings, and you can make the game look beautiful and play it at 60 frames per second at 1080p, alright? Meanwhile, a 980 Ti can do the same thing, custom settings, make it look really good, play really well in 1440p. Well, when it comes to 4K, unfortunately, the 1080 ain't cutting it, right? Now, maybe a Titan XP would, I have no idea. If I did have a Titan XP, I would probably want it water-cooled, if I'm honest. And even then, I don't know. I think it might just barely be able to give you beauty, not have to play at the resolution scaling. Because remember, we're at 85% resolution scaling. Give you beauty, not... Look, we just went down to 62 frames per second. I don't know if you saw that. So give you beauty, not have to play with resolution scaling, and let you turn some things up from here. I mean, I have depth of field off. I have, I think I have ambient occlusion off, right? Like, I mean, I have settings completely off. Where with the 980 Ti, you do get to at least have some things turned on at 1440p. Alright, I think there's some more bad guys coming. I do believe there are. Okay, so see how we're at 64, 65 frames per second, even with VSync off, and there's going to be areas, you know, like in this game where things get even worse, right? So let's go up to 100% resolution scaling. Now we're at true 4K, alright? VSync's off, true 4K. Hey, and we're in the 50s, we're at 51. Wow, I am not doing so well trying to talk to you guys about all this and play the game at the same time. I would say most of the time I can actually play this part of the game well enough and talk to you guys, but sometimes there's a lot that I'm trying to articulate, right? You're listening to me talk about how to play a game in 4K, so I got to focus more on you than the game. But then there's going to be some people who are going to be annoyed at how badly I'm playing the game, and it's a delicate balance at 1 or 2 in the morning or whatever time it is. I know it's after 1, actually. I know it's after 1 because the last time I looked at a watch or a clock or a telephone or whatever, it was after 1. Well, like I said, I wanted to talk about all this while it was fresh in my mind. Alright, trying to reload. I am not doing well. Not doing well at all. Alright, I think that's it. Alright, so this area over here, we're at full 4K, and it's going into like 52 frames per second, now it's 65, 64, and you might think to yourself like, holy crap, why would you even play with the resolution scaling? Well, here's the issue. I've not played this with a G-Sync monitor in 4K, right? I don't think I've played this game with a G-Sync monitor at all. Now, I have used a 1440p Acer Predator G-Sync monitor before. I had it for a while. And I've used the BenQ 1080p G-Sync monitor. And let me tell y'all something. A lot of people make G-Sync sound like it's perfect, but it's not. Alright? G-Sync has 2 huge benefits. Alright? 2 very good things about G-Sync. With G-Sync, you can get rid of... I'm walking around here just so we can check out the frame rate. Alright, this particular spot, see it keeps going down to 50, 51. This particular spot is one of these magical spots on the map that has lower frame rate. Here, I'll show you what I mean. See, we're in the low 50s here. Let's see if it gets any higher when we go elsewhere. Let's go back out of this mission. Alright, so G-Sync, it gets rid of most screen tearing. Does not get rid of all screen tearing. It actually does this thing that I call bubbling. It makes bubbles on your screen where like your screen almost tears but it doesn't. If you're playing a game that's like, and maybe you're tickling like the limits of the G-Sync window, or maybe, you know, there's all kinds of reasons it can do it. Usually because the game is demanding, right? You're in a demanding section of the game, and I'll be using a G-Sync monitor and it will almost screen tear, but not quite, right? You can make the argument that, hey, there's no screen tearing, and you're correct, but now there's these weird bubbles in the screen. Alright? Okay, so now we're still in the 50s, but we're in the high 50s, the low 60s more often, where before we were in the low 50s more often. Remember, we're in 4K, so it's one of those things where the frame rate differences won't be as big. Like, if we were playing in 1080p, it might be a 10 or 15 frames per second difference. Okay, now we're in the 60s, now we're back in the 50s. But that area where I was at, where I was running in circles, that area in particular tends to stay in the low 50s. See what I mean? Alright, so let's go back over here. Matter of fact, let's turn on VSync and go back over here. Graphics, VSync Auto, which is, I think it's kind of a variable Oops, that was not what I wanted to do. I think it's kind of a variable VSync if you put on auto, I think. Alright, so G-Sync, it's not perfect. It's got these bubbles sometimes, not always, but it also has hard stutters. When you do gaming, there's a lot of things to think about. Alright, everyone always just talks about that average frame rate, which, by the way, we're almost locked at 60 frames per second, even though I'm not playing with the resolution scaling. Alright, now it's starting to feel a little bit juddery. Alright, and that's why I did the resolution scaling thing, is I wanted the game to be perfectly smooth. Alright, and there are downsides to doing that resolution scaling the way I was doing. It makes it so it's less sharp. It's not quite blurry. Ooh, went down to 50 frames per second and it got real juddery. Real juddery. Alright, so a lot of people, they just think about the average frame rate, or they think about screen tearing, and think about whatever, but you got bubbles, you got hard jumps, you've got a little bit of stuttering, you got like micro stutters, you got big jumpy stutters. There's all kinds of different things, right? So I'm walking right now and it feels jittery. Alright, it judders a little bit, it shimmies a little bit, which goes back to why I chose the stabilization version of the AA. So, like right now, the frame pacing's not good. It doesn't feel great. Alright, that's why I did the 85% resolution scale, because, and I really think if I could have had like a 95 or a 90, it would have been better, but they only give me this 85, like I said. So I'm doing the 85 because it feels 100% smooth when I do that. Perfect. It feels like I'm playing in 1080p. Like it feels like I'm playing in 1080p with the GTX 970. Like it just feels perfect. Like I'm playing on a television. Yes, there's more motion blur because I'm using a TV instead of a monitor, but this feels very good. It feels very responsive for a television. And I'm not using the gaming mode. This Samsung TV, and your mileage may vary, but for me, the gaming mode actually had a very pleasing picture. It actually looked pretty good. But it kind of felt more jittery. And I feel like maybe if I was using a really strong graphics card, let's say it's the future and I'm using a GTX 1180, then maybe it would have been better. But I'm actually using like standard play here. So alright, back to I guess we could try different games. I guess we could. You want to see what other games look like? I mean, why not, right? Let's just talk about 4K. The Division, the settings I just showed you, resolution scaling 85%, you can play the game. It's pretty reasonable. If you have a G-Sync monitor, it's even going to be possible that you won't need to play at the resolution scaling. Alright? Possible. I don't know. And then your mileage may vary. Like some people are more sensitive to the stutter than others. I'm pretty sensitive to it. I'm the type of guy that gets motion sick on a roller coaster. I like roller coasters. And I'm going on the roller coaster and I'm like, hey, this is pretty fun. At the same time, I'm still getting motion sickness despite that fact. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sensitive to this stuff. Alright? It is what it is. Alright, so let's quit the game. Maybe start another one. So G-Sync monitors, though, they're not perfect. So as I keep repeating myself, they have two benefits. They mostly get rid of screen tearing, and they also are more responsive. They're much more responsive than using V-Sync. And those are two very good things. But like I said, I've had downsides. I've had the stuttering and such. Alright. Assassin's Creed Syndicate would probably be idiocy to play. I will tell you though, in 1440p with a GTX 1080, it does the very high preset very well. You don't even have to modify it, just the very high preset. I think Dying Light, my guess is Dying Light should play alright in 4K, and I say that because using an R9 380, it plays in 1440p really well. You gotta turn a bunch of stuff down, but it still looks good and it plays really well. So my guess has been 4K will actually be pretty decent for Dying Light. A lot of the titles you may have noticed on that home screen for the computer have been chosen with 4K performance in mind. Alright? So How viable is 4K? For me, it's not viable enough, right? We're using a 1080 in the high 1900s, the low 2000s neighborhood for the clock speed. And oh, it's got a 6700 for the processor that it's paired with, and 16 gigabytes of 2400 megahertz DDR4. I know somebody's going to be like, we use higher speed RAM, and okay, I still don't think that's going to solve the problem, the ultimate problem, right? But Mankind Divided, I was really disappointed. I'll tell you why. In 1440p, the 1080 like slams it, right? Mankind Divided, the 1080 just kills it in 1440p. And in 1080p, the GTX 1060 kills it. You got to turn some stuff down. You can't max it out. But the 1060 just murders Deus Ex Mankind. It looks beautiful. Again, the settings are not maxed out, but it looks beautiful. Why am I only at 30 FPS? It might be just because we're here. I think when we go into the game, it goes higher. All right, 3840, full screen, VSync on, texture quality, high, shadow map size. Let's go for medium. Foliage quality. Let's go for medium, I guess. No, we'll go for high for now. All right, view distance. Let's turn that down a lot for now. Ambient occlusion. Yes, but HBAO plus no. Depth of field, I think we'll leave it on. Motion blur, no way. Anti-aliasing, on. Film grain, off. I know it's 4K, so I know people are probably going to be like, well, why do you need AA? Well, I was just playing The Division in 4K with no AA. It was pretty terrible, to be completely real with you. It was pretty not good. You could definitely see jaggies. Like, people are always like, you can't see the jaggies at 4K. I mean, to me, that makes as much sense as when people tell you that you can't see 144 frames per second with the naked eye. You can see jaggies at 4K. They're there. Are they going to bother you? Some people they'll bother, some people they won't. For me, they're a little bothersome. Sometimes I'm in the mood where they don't bother me whatsoever, and then sometimes they're a little bothersome. Alright, it's just taking, oh, there we go, press that. I was like, this is taking way too long. Alrighty. 60 frames per second, no screen tearing, just running and running. Alright, is it the right bumper to jump? Yes, it is. Okay. Right bumper to jump. Ooh, went under 60. Oh, went to 50. Alright, so this is another thing, right? If this television did not have a cap at 60 hertz, I think it would help with some of the stuttering, because when it comes to native resolution testing, guys, I spend a lot of money and a lot of time and take up a lot of space to use native resolution testing. This is a native 4K television. I use native 1440p monitor, native 1080p monitor. I have a 144 hertz monitor for 1080p and a 60 hertz monitor for 1080p. Now, why would I do that? Like, why in my right mind would I have a 144 and a 60? Why not get rid of that 60, right? Well, here is the thing. Here, let me turn off the VSync, make sure I do this correctly. Alright, VSync off, 70. Turn the camera, 66. I picked good settings from the get-go. Although I would not be surprised if they need to come down a little bit, because once we have real action on the screen, the frame rate could go down even further. But now we're in the 70s, but remember, just at 60s. So yeah, this is viable. Single card, you play a game like Dying Light, which is a nice modern game with some depth to it. It looks like a modern game. You can play this in 1440p. Look at that. Not 1440p, but 4K. Anyway, I test in native resolution, alright? And that's very important to me. Going back to why do I keep the 60 frames per second monitor? Well, guess what? Most people gaming are playing at 1080p. Most people playing 1080p have a 60 hertz monitor. I know a guy with a Titan X. Yeah, a Titan X, the old one, the Maxwell Titan. That looks beautiful. This looks good. The only thing I want to change is there's too much pop in. So we up the view distance, which does affect the frame rate. Oh, you know what? How far did... I used to have a system. I used to play this game enough. It's around the halfway mark to get rid of most of the pop in. Alright. Anyway. I know a guy with a Maxwell Titan X with a 1080p 60Hz monitor. Now I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's overkill, or oh, that's crazy. Not really. Not really. You play Rise of the Tomb Raider with the Titan X, which is just a little bit more powerful than the 980 Ti, which I happen to have two 980 Ti's to compare to. Rise of the Tomb Raider with a 980 Ti, if you max that game out in 1080p, you're just barely going to be in a 60 frames per second neighborhood in certain parts of the game, right? So if you're the kind of person who wants to actually max the game out with a single card, the 1080p 60 frames per second monitor is actually kind of relevant, which is crazy. It goes back to what I said at the start of this video. Here it is, 2016, and we're still at a point where a 1080p 60 frames per second with an expensive GPU could be relevant. And it's true. I mean, even if you use a GTX 1070, which is in the same neighborhood as the 980 Ti or the Titan X, even if you use a 1070, then you're still in that situation where there's certain games you max out and a 1080p 60Hz monitor can still be relevant. Alright, so let's pick a different game. Oh, Saints Row 4 plays awesomely in 4K. Almost maxed out. You turn shadows down to medium, turn ambient occlusion off. Saints Row 4 plays great. What about Skyrim? I have not tested that yet. Okay. We're going to find this out together. Okay, so the resolution they chose is 1152 by 648, and that's a big no. So 3840 by 2160. Ultra settings. That's not going to fly. I already know it's not going to fly, but whatever. Alright. Where's motion blur? Radial blur quality. You know what? Skyrim is a weird game. You know, let's just start the game and see what happens. Alright. Skyrim is a weird game because you can play it in 1080p just fine with most graphics cards. But I've noticed, even with my 980 Ti, even with my 1070, Skyrim, even at 1440p, starts putting up a fight. It won't be a perfect 60 FPS. Alright, so we're at 60 FPS right here. This is not a great looking area. I apologize. But we're at 4K Ultra. And despite the fact that this is a very drab area, it looks good at 60 FPS. Alright. I've not really played this game in a long time. So the question becomes, do I have a save file? Oh, they have pictures. Alright. Do I have a save file somewhere good looking to show this off? You know what? Maybe I'm confused. Maybe at 1440p with the 1070 and the 980 Ti, what I really mean is I can't keep 120 frames per second. Maybe that's what I mean. Now I'm going to have to go back and test it with those cards. It's been a while. I don't, you know, like, I've said this many times. If I had the chance, I would love to really play Skyrim for real. What it is because, oh wow, this is nice. This is nice. Ooh, there's some flicker. I don't like that flicker. Alright, it's gone now, but there were some assets that were flickering. I don't know how well this is showing up on the TV, on the camera for you, but this is nice. So far, so good. Is there a sprint button in this game? Yeah, I think it's this left bumper. Maybe. So we've got 60 frames per second. The only thing I'll complain about is there's motion blur. And again, if I had like a real monitor, I almost got that Acer monitor. See, there's this Acer monitor that's been out for a long time. Remember, I'm recording this in September of 2016, and this Acer monitor has been out for a really long time. It's been out, I think, since 2014. It's got a 1 millisecond gray to gray, and it is 1 millisecond gray to gray, 4K. I think it's 27 inch, and it's G-Sync. I forget which one it is, but it's probably literally, there's only one of them that Acer makes, and it's probably a TN panel, which again, I like TN panels. You know, I'm that kind of guy. Whatever I do, this is perfectly viable. This is nice. Seriously. Now, how's it going to play with mods and stuff? Great question. I don't know. Oh, you know what? I had a bunch of mods. I don't have any installed anymore, but I had a bunch of mods, and I bet those were affecting my frame rate before. The thing is I didn't go crazy. My graphics mods were pretty vanilla, but I had mods that added NPCs and quests and weapons and stuff like that, but it could have affected performance. This is perfectly viable. The Ultra preset, 4K. If you don't have an aversion to motion blur, this is pretty good. Now maybe you guys know, maybe there is a mod that gets rid of the motion blur, or an INI file. I'm telling you guys, it's probably pushing 3 AM at this point. Oh, in case you can't hear it, that's my GTX 1080 just screaming its little head off because I've got the fans at 80%. It's an EVGA GTX 1080 superclock, and I chose it for its form factor, right? I chose it because I needed it to work in ITX cases, and I'm going to use it in other cases too for testing. But here's the thing, is I don't know how many 1080s I'm going to get. With the 1070, I got 4 of them. I got a big old Zotac amp 1070, which is about as big as a 980 Ti classified. All right, that's pretty big. And then I got a 1070 for the wind from EVGA. That's pretty good sized. Then I got it's not as big as the Zotac amp or an EVGA classified, but it's still bigger than normal. So I got that. So those two are big. Then I got a water-cooled one, right? And that's going to take up a bunch of space. My water-cooled 1070. It's an MSI Seahawk. And then finally I got the Founders Card 1070. And then that's a nice normal size that'll fit in an ITX case with no problem. Now, when it comes to the 1080, I don't think I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't get free graphics cards. So I don't think I'm going to be able to get a whole bunch of 1080s for testing. So I got the superclock because of its size, because it's going to fit in every system that I put it in, and then it's got the 2 fans on it, and it keeps itself relatively cool. Now the problem is there is a problem. It's loud. At 80% it's loud, and you can make the argument that, oh well, of course it is, it's at 80%. But here's the thing. I know there's a lot of people that are going to say this isn't loud, but it is. It is. I hate how it sounds. My 1070 for the wind doesn't sound this bad. It's still loud too, in my opinion, but this sounds worse. This has like a mechanical sound to it. You can hear the sound of the air, but you can also hear the sound of the fan. The fan makes a whirring sound. I don't like it so much. All right. Let's choose one more demanding game and then be done. I have not even tried Far Cry 4 yet. I don't think I'm going to have any trouble with this. This is the first time I've even set the game up. I just installed a bunch of these games on this system for this testing. So yeah, I know when I pitched this video to myself, it was just supposed to be about The Division. But at the same time, I figured we're going to have a real conversation about the viability of 4K gaming. Now, if you're going to play Skyrim, Dying Light, Overwatch, Doom, if you're going to play games like that, then 4K is pretty viable right now, right? But I'm of the mind that I'm going to get bored at some point. Oh, let me tell you something really weird about Deus Ex Mankind Divided, and it's the weirdest thing in the world. I actually think that game looks better in 1080p than 1440p, and I'm not making it up, alright? I started the game out with a GTX 1060 in 1080p, and I thought it looked great. And then I played it with the 1080 in 1440p, just about maxed out, and the game didn't look right. See, 1440p makes a game like Grand Theft Auto look better. It makes a game like The Witcher 3 look better. 1440p versus 1080p, that 1440p looks better because those kind of games, even Far Cry, right? So Far Cry 4, The Witcher 3, Grand Theft Auto 5, those are games that have a lot of detail, all right? Like a ton of little detail and a ton of little clutter, right? And the higher you get the resolution, the more of the detail you can see. So you play The Witcher 3 in 1440p and you start noticing like the silverware on the table in a restaurant, okay? Like, because there's little clutter everywhere. Deus Ex Mankind Divided, it doesn't really give you that same kind of reward. Where are we going? There we go. It doesn't really give you that same kind of reward, right? Because they don't have a bunch of those little assets. So there's not a huge benefit of going to 1440p. Hey, that's you're lying to me. There we go. It said it was full screen, but it was not full screen. It was in windowed mode. Alright, what else do we want to do? Graphics quality are on high. Continue offline. We'll see where we are in the game. We're going to play at the graphics settings here in a minute. Anyway, Mankind Divided looks great at 1080p. Here we are with the high preset in 4K. And Far Cry 4, I'm pretty sure VSync is on. And VSync is off. Alright, now it's on. There we go. Of course it was off. We were above 60, idiot. I'm usually on a 144 Hz monitor. This is pretty dope. Not gonna lie. This is pretty good. Alright. Far Cry 4. Viable with a 1080. Perfectly viable. A lot of you guys probably don't like this field of view though, so let's give it a bigger field of view. There we go. It's like this bar. So 1, 2. Let's give it 2 notches. That looks pretty beefy. Alright, still 60 frames per second on the high preset. It's not, I don't think it's going to keep 60. Of course, remember, here, let me turn VSync off. I know you guys are going to want to know, well, what's the real frame rate? Alright, 65, 71 with the high preset. Let's go with the settings that I normally use. Anyway, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, it, in my opinion, looks better. Why did you do that to me? In my opinion, it looks better on a 1080p monitor. It's weird. It is so weird. It's something about the I'd say it's the aspect ratio, but it should have the same. It should be 16:9. All right. Texture quality, we'll try ultra. Shadow on high for now. Post effects, we'll try high. Geometry, we'll try high. Vegetation, we'll try medium. Terrain, ultra for now. Water, low. Environment, high. Ambient occlusion, SSBC for now. Anti-aliasing, SMAA for now. No volumetric fog. Simulated fur because I like it. And then trees relief is off. These are roughly the settings I would normally use at 1440p and so on. And we're at 61 to 67 frames per second. Actually, that's not true. I would have shadows probably on very high instead of just high. But as you can see, we are just barely at 60 frames per second. Go into the color settings. How's that look? That's not bad. I like contrast and pop. Alright, so 4K is actually viable. It's just not viable in every game. I mean, there are some sacrifices to playing the Division. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are some sacrifices. I banged my head for hours to come up with those settings and that resolution scaling so that there was no stuttering, and then I could have VSync on so there was no screen tearing. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, you shouldn't have picked the Division, you big dummy. And again, it comes back to me, dude, this is a $650 graphics card. It's not cheap, okay? So I need it to earn its keep, if you will, right? Like, if I didn't have a YouTube channel and I wasn't testing, would I spend this much money on a graphics card that doesn't give me the 4K experience that I want? And to answer that question, I don't know. I don't know that I would. I might just stick to 1440p if I'm honest. Heck, maybe even 1080p some days. You know, sometimes I have those days where I'm like, 1080p, it's just fine. I use a BenQ XL2430T, T is in Tango, and that's a great little monitor. It's not G-Sync, but it is a great little 1080p monitor, really smooth motion, really nice contrast. Then what BenQ has that I love, BenQ saves the day with this thing called this black equalizer. I think the black EQ, I'm not 100% sure what it's called right now off the top of my head. But it just saves the day because it really helps me dial the image into where I want it. Alright, so with VSync on, because remember we were at like 61, 62 with it off. With VSync on, I'm feeling stutters. I have terrain on Ultra. And technically I could ditch AA altogether. Now at 1440p, not 1440p, but at 4K I can probably get by with terrain on high. I'm real picky about my terrain, man. Like, I usually want to look at these rocks and see them as just with as much detail as I can, because see, that's already a little bit blurry. Even when you have the terrain at Ultra, it's not always perfect. Now for all I need to look this up online, because I've always felt like terrain was affecting the rocks, like the ground that I'm driving on right now, and like the mountains that I'm climbing and stuff. I've always felt like terrain affected that. It'd be funny if I'm wrong though, if they're just lumped in with textures. But textures are on Ultra, and I'm telling you, I feel like I've noticed a difference. Alright, so for example, looking at this road here, and looking at some rocks, this park. I'm pretty sure going to Ultra, puts a little more detail in there. I'm pretty sure. I'm going to do this off camera, the testing whether or not Ultra is affecting that. Plus, Nvidia actually tells you things like that sometimes on their site when you look up games on there. Put it back on high for now though, because we're trying to see just how smoothly we can get this game to play. This actually looks pretty good. Here's the thing, guys. Going on a 4K TV, I'm not sold on this, right? I don't like gaming on a TV anymore anyway though. I like gaming on a 144 Hz monitor. And then the settings I choose, realistically the settings I choose, I usually pimp a game out pretty hard. So even though it's a 144 Hz monitor, I'm usually bouncing between 60 and 100, 110 frames per second. Usually staying in the 70s. like most of the time, if I look at the frame rate counter, I'm doing like 74 frames per second or something. And then there'll be areas that go up to 100 or go down to 60. That's what I normally play at, right? Playing at 60 hertz and having motion blur and having slower response time, TV doesn't really do it for me. Oops. Although this is pretty nice. Like, I have a feeling that if I had some friends come over and check this out in 4K, they would be impressed. Oh, you know what? Do we want to fly? Nah, we're not. Well, yeah, let's fly. Alright, so what you do... I haven't even played this game in so long. I'll tell you, there's so many games that I don't get to play because I've been testing so much hardware. I've built 3 different computers at least in the past month. Right? I've built a new water-cooled 6700K rig. Then I've built 2 mini ITX rigs. Plus, about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, I built an AMD rig. And long story short, I've been testing all that hardware. And to do that, I pretty much have to use The Division, GTA 5, The Witcher 3. Those are my 3 big ones. And what I'll do is I will do some very specific stuff in those 3 games that I know is very demanding. And it just hammers on the frame rate, right? Like, I'll be playing GTA 5 and in the city it's getting 80, 90, 100 frames per second, pretty steady, dips down to the 70s a little bit. But I'll take it to parts of that game that like just go down to 48 frames per second. Alright? Because I'm testing the hardware. I'm trying to see what it can do. So, and then I add this stupid 4K TV to the mix. I was already testing the 1080. You know what? The more games I play, the more viable the 1080 is looking for 4K. The problem is, let's do one last game. The problem is, I don't like it when there's games that are holdouts. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you can play most of your library in 4K, but, you know, here's some games that kind of suck in 4K. Like Mankind Divided. See, and Mankind Divided played great in 1080p. It was awesome with the 1060. So I thought it would, you know, turn some settings down. I thought it would play great in 4K, but it didn't. I've not tried it with the texture quality on medium yet. Let's just start the game. Alright, so as usual, this has become one of my big long videos. And, you know, some of you guys, you're cool with that. Some of you, you're not. You're like, why do you talk so much? Why don't you edit your videos? Why are you pointing a camera at the TV? Let me answer that one for you while this loads up. So, I use a camera. Guys, I've got over 400 videos on this channel. At least over 300. I think it's over 400. And the majority of them are not a camera pointed at a screen. Alright, the majority of them I use an Elgato, I use a second computer, and I capture beautiful footage. And sometimes I'll use sometimes I use shadow play even, right? But when I do choose to point the camera at the screen, it's for a good reason. When I'm jumping in and out of this many games, and I'm changing these settings, and I'm turning VSync on and off, and I'm playing with resolution scaling. Sorry, it's been a lot of talking and I've got a cold. All those things can corrupt the recording, even if I use an Elgato. And you know, a lot of you guys might not know this. Even if you use an Elgato, you can screw the recording up. I've done it before, and it sucks. Oh man, 37 frames per second. Well, even if I'm going to turn VSync off, but that's still not going to save it. Alright, VSync's off. 39 frames per second. So, we're not at 60. Are Are there presets? Oh, there are presets. No, I'm not gonna go to ultra, dude. Stop it. I'm trying to change the preset. There we go. Let's do the low preset. Low preset. It didn't tell me to restart the game, so really? I changed texture quality. 43 frames per second. I went from having some settings on to the low preset. Now, is this as low as the settings will go? I don't know. Let's find out. Ha! That's as low as it goes. For sake of argument, let's quit the game and reload it to see if that, like, kicks some things down. But see what I mean? Like, not every game is going to be viable. And that kind of sucks. Oh, and you know what? I got desperate, right? I got desperate. And I put this game in 1080 on the 4K TV. And it didn't look very good. Alright? I already tried that. It looked blurry. This is a game... Oh, dang it, I sat down. This is a game that would benefit from resolution scaling. Because you start at 4K, and then you just turn some of that resolution scaling down, not all the way down to, 1080. Remember, the GTX 1080 can smash this game in 1440p. It can almost max it. Which is why I find it so perplexing that turning... Alright, let's try this again. 1440p, almost maxed out, smashes this game. Handles it. 4K, turn the settings down to like the low preset, it's still not even hitting 60 FPS. So, a little bit disappointed. Alright, let us enjoy our low preset adventure. Wow, that is so crappy looking right there. You don't even know, you probably can't even tell by watching the video. So, the 1080, this almost has me thinking something like the Titan XP could make single card 4K gaming viable. But the thing is, if you don't want loud fans, you're going to want water cooling. Alright? Now, how loud? 44 frames per second. I gave up all those settings and it's still 44 FPS. Now, to be fair, when you go out here, it does go up. See that? 62, 70, 74, 66. Thought it crashed there for a minute. Go over here. 66, 70, 62, 59, 56. If you want to play at the lowest preset in 4K, it's viable. 49 frames per second. It's viable to an extent, right? Like it can be played. But I don't know how demanding later parts of the game will be. Later parts of the game might be super demanding. So, let's quit this game and we're wrapping this video up. I don't know if I'm going to launch another game or not. I might not. We'll take a look at that home screen and see what grabs us. I could do BioShock. I think BioShock is a gimme. I think BioShock's going to work. No questions asked. I think The Witcher 3 actually stands a good shot. So I could either launch The Witcher 3 or Assassin's Creed Syndicate. The Witcher 3, you can play that in 1440p with a 1060 and it looks good and it plays well. So I feel like The Witcher 3 should succeed. Wow, first time I ran it on this system. So the 4K gaming, it's somewhat viable. I want a 4K monitor. No, it's not the first time I ran it on this system. I want a 4K monitor versus the TV is what I think what I really want. But all right, yes. See, all right. But the only one that I would even consider is that Acer that I mentioned before. It's got a 1 millisecond graded gray. It's got a TN panel. it's G-Sync. The only thing is all the reviewers acted like they didn't like it. And I feel like it was more than just the TN that they complained about. I'll have to go back and watch some reviews. I remember I was turned away from it based on, like, a lot of the reviews seemed to not be into it. Alright, so these settings right here, where we're getting 30 frames per second, these exact same settings just are smashed at 1440p with this card because I was testing it last night. Alright, so go into video, post-processing, go down to SSAO, and that's probably all I'm going to change. Graphics though, that don't make no sense. This says the resolution is 1440p. So why was it fronting on me? See, now we're getting in the 40s. Huh. It was like at 30 at 1440p. I don't know what was going on. Alright, let me hit the Alt key. If I can find it. Oh, did I crash the game? Alright, so Afterburner lately, if you press the Alt key, you can get it to show up the overlay in The Witcher 3. I think I crashed the game. Although, if I did crash the game, it didn't even give me a notice of the game being crashed. Preparing to launch. Is it already running is the question. I might even have to restart the computer now. Sometimes there's shenanigans. Alright, no. You know what? We're not going to press the Alt key again because I don't want to deal with that. Alright, so I know I repeat myself a lot in this video. Remember, this is conversational. We're having a talk about what I think of 4K so far. My little ITX computer is screaming its head off right now with an 80% fan speed on the card. If I didn't do that when I was playing The Division, if I didn't have this at 80%, it would thermal throttle enough to just make it not enjoyable, right? And I know people are like, it's not thermal throttling, dude. It's just not boosting as much. I'm going to call it thermal throttling, and I'm going to make a whole video on why I'm going to call it thermal throttling. I don't care. I'll put it like this. I'll bite my tongue. I'll bite my tongue. When a person who gets a bunch of free graphics cards given to them is defending Nvidia, look, as a paying customer, as somebody, I paid money for this graphics card, and I watch the core speed go down as the card gets hotter, and I've made a video on this. Maybe I'll link to it in the description. And I've proven it in a video. And I could prove it in this one too if I wanted to, but I'd have to have the Afterburner overlay on, and this video is probably an hour long already or longer. But anyway, as a paying customer for this graphics card, when I have to have the fan at 80% or else my clock speed's going to go down, and then as the clock speed goes down, then my game plays like crap and it's stuttering. Alright, are you understanding? I paid a lot of money for this card. If I don't have that fan at 80%, the Division stutters. If I do have that fan at 80%, Division doesn't stutter. I'm going to call that thermal throttling. Alright? Because the GPU gets hot, the performance goes down. My performance has throttled down due to thermals. It's probably 3 in the morning. So I don't get free graphics cards, right? Like if somebody had given me 2 free Titan XPs and about 60 other GPUs or more for free, then yeah, I might defend Nvidia too. But I paid money for this, and as a paying customer, I'm not overly satisfied, right? So that's why I say thermal throttling. As someone who paid money for this product, I'm not satisfied. Anyway, sorry for that rant. Okay, let's lower some stuff and see what we can squeak out of here. I'm more or less using the kind of settings I use with the GTX 960 when I play at 1080p. Let's see what we just squeezed out. 50, 45, 50, that sucks. 48, oh wait a minute. What's the VSync situation though? VSync off. So what we're going to do is VSync off, and if it's still stuttering, there's a trick with The Witcher 3. If it is stuttering, sometimes capping the frame rate at 60 FPS will actually stop the stuttering. Why? I don't know. But it does, it works, and I don't like stutters, so I can vouch for that. It doesn't always work, but it often works. Alright, let me cap it at 60. Anyway, I would have to turn the settings down even further from this, and I don't know if I want to be honest with you. I don't know if I want to make the settings go any lower than this. I guess I could turn AA off, but like how much is that really going to give me? See, we're at 51 frames per second, 46 though, it just went down to 46. If I had a G-Sync 4K monitor, this might feel fine. This might be perfectly viable. Which goes back to, I definitely do want to try this with a monitor. This does not look 4K to me. Like all the other games I've played so far look 4K. This almost looks like resolution scaling is at play, but it shouldn't be. I don't think this game even has resolution scaling. Alright. And this is 100% first impressions. Full screen. This is the first time I've played this game in 4K native. Oh, detail levels at ultra. Idiot. Alright. That would make a difference. Alright, we're probably up 49, but I think this is going to be more viable. Yeah, Pascal, look, let me say this about Pascal. I have 4 1070s, 1 1060, and 1 1080. And the truth of the matter is, well, let me back up here. Pascal, it puts all of its bets on clock speed. That's where it put all its money. Instead of cores and instructions per clock, they chose clock speed. If you have a Pascal card, like my GTX 1060 actually can play games at 2100 megahertz. It's pretty wonderful, right? My 1060 is just a champion. It's a really satisfying card, and honestly, I would have no problem recommending it. Love my 1060. For 1080p, it's really good. 1440p, it's okay. Don't buy it for 1440p. Don't tell yourself like, oh, I'm gonna get myself a GTX 1060 with the intent of playing 1440p, because if you do that, it's pretty limited. You got to turn a bunch of stuff down. Sometimes you got to turn geometry type things down in a game, so now you're playing at 1440p resolution, but your character models look worse, your building, everything looks worse. It can do 1440p okay, it's great at 1080. I think the 1060 is a really solid card for 1080. Remember, it's not going to be like 120 frames per second in a lot of games, unless you have settings turned down. Like, know what you're getting yourself into. You get yourself a GTX 1060, and why are there so many freaking bad guys? Get yourself a GTX 1060, and, you know, expect to have, like, very high to ultra settings, somewhere in there, and do better than 60 frames per second, sometimes like 100 frames per second, and you'll be pretty good. You'll be pretty good to go. So anyway, out of all my cards, my 1060, that holds a great overclock. My For the Win 1070, it holds an okay overclock. It's like in the mid 2000s, sometimes low 2000s. Same thing with my MSI Seahawk, but usually my For the Win 1070 is a smidgen higher than my MSI Seahawk. But my MSI Seahawk is water cooled, and I don't have to have the fan up, which is pretty important to me. All right, and then my Zotac, it's a dog. It does like 1925 for the clock speed, and then this card right here. Let me see if I can actually hit the Alt key without crashing the game. And no, we're gonna crash the game. Anyway, this right here, it's okay. My super clock, my GTX 1080 super clock, it's okay. It's you gotta have the fan turned up just to keep a more or less 2000 megahertz clock. And here's the thing, and a lot of people haven't wrapped their heads around this yet. Pascal puts its performance eggs in the high clock basket. All right, if in real gaming, you hear how loud this thing is? If in real gaming your Pascal card stays above 2000 megahertz, preferably above, like 2025, if it stays above 2000 megahertz, more often than not, it will perform in a satisfactory manner. All right? If it goes into the 1900s and the 1800s, though, you can have issues. Here's the thing. If you haven't done all the testing like I have, you might not notice this, right? Let's say your 1080 or your 1070 is always in the 1900s, like 1974 or something, and it's always there, and you are happy with it, and the settings that you play with, you're happy at. Well, I'm here to tell you that if you could turn your fan speed up, or if you had it water cooled, and you could keep it above 2000, like 2050 even, and it would stay there for your 4-hour gaming session, there is a chance that you can turn one setting up higher that changes things, right? As stupid as it sounds, maybe your ambient occlusion can go up one more setting in 1440p. Or maybe in 4K your shadows can go up one more setting, and it makes a noticeable difference. All right, here's the thing, if you're going to pay this much money for these graphics cards, I believe you should expect to be satisfied. Okay, and the problem with Pascal, I feel like almost forces you to buy a Titan XP, as stupid as that sounds. I know that sounds stupid. Well, I'll put it like this: if you're going to do 1440p gaming and you buy a 1080 and you're not going to do 4K or anything, it's going to do the job in most games. Not all of them. You're not going to max the Division out with a 1080 and 1440p. That's not going to happen. Not if you want to keep 60 FPS. But in most games, 1440p, the 1080 does great. Okay, cool, but that's a $650 card, dog, for 1440p. Now, I don't know how your mind works, but my mind, when I'm thinking about 1440p gaming, to always be happy, I don't want to have to pay $650. All right, last generation with Maxwell, you could buy a 980 and it was going to always play every game at 1080p, but it was like $500 some odd for like an AIB card with a factory overclock and a good cooler on it. Then you look at Pascal and it's like, okay, you want to get the 80 series card, well that's like $650 for a decent one. You can get like an MSI Gaming X, which I would love to try, but that's like $720 for an air-cooled card. in the 1080, as we've already discussed, is it's 4K capable. You've seen that in this video. It's 4K capable, but it's not 4K you can count on. You can't count on it for 60 FPS 4K all the time. So, I mean, I guess you could turn a bunch of stuff down, but now you're playing in 4K with a ton of settings turned down with a $650 to a $720 graphics card. It kind of makes me feel like a chump to spend that much money and be turning the settings down that far. It makes me feel like a chump, not gonna lie. So, to me, the 1080, like in the future, you watch this video in the future when a 1080 is used for like $200 or $300, then no big deal, right? A year and a half, 2 years from now, when you can get a 1080 for $300, maybe $350, and you can play 4K gaming, all of a sudden it looks like an okay deal. But right now, $720 to turn all my settings down and Deus Ex and still not get 60 FPS on the low preset with VSync off, I don't know, man. That doesn't feel right. So I'm frustrated with Pascal. You got to have yourself a good overclocker. If this was one of those 1080s that holds a 2100 megahertz overclock, maybe every one of these games would have been viable in 4K. Now that's the other thing that sucks, is now you're buying a $700, $650 lottery ticket, more or less, right? You're buying yourself a $700 lottery ticket. Like, maybe my graphics card will play 4K. Look, man, I'm not trying to do all that. I'm not trying to pay $700 to hope I can play at the resolution I want to. Because I know somebody in the comments is going to be like, well, I have a 1080 and it plays at 2125 all day, hours and hours straight. And it's like, good for you. Because you see, mine doesn't. Alright? And you might be looking at those numbers on Afterburner, since I've been talking over those numbers this whole time, and you might be saying to yourself, well, all you got to do is move those sliders around. Here's the thing, this card, any higher than the numbers you see right there, even on the memory, any higher than those numbers right there, and it crashes. I made an overclocking video for this card when I got the card. I sat you guys down and I walked you through my overclocking process. And in that video, I think I was at plus 95 on the core clock, and I had told you guys in that video that it would probably, because it was crashing at the end of that video, it was a live demonstration, much like this, and I said it'll probably settle between 80 and 91. Well, we're at plus 87, I think. Yeah, plus 87. So, now keep in mind that if the card would stay cool, if the graphics card would stay cool, that's a fairly reliable 2000 megahertz. The lowest I've seen it go is 1987, which is just under 2000. So I mean, it's not a garbage overclock, but it's not desirable. It's not my For the Win card, for example, my 1070 For the Win, it stays above 2000. Even when the temperature goes up, it stays above 2000. There's so much lottery involved with Pascal, and it sucks. The thing about Maxwell was, if you had a Maxwell card that was not a good overclocker, it still probably performed well enough to make you happy. Alright? Even if it was not a good overclocker. I have, I think, 7 or 9. It's an odd number. I've either got 7 or 9 Maxwell cards, I think. And I have like 2 of them that are good overclockers, and I kid you not, 5 or 7 of them are not good overclockers. You know, they're like 1380 is as high as they go stable. Stable. They can go higher, but they won't be stable. And I've got one that almost hits 1500 megahertz. It's a 980 Ti water cooled, and it goes up to like 1492 or something, 1493. I mean, it is almost 1500. But it crashes if you get it to 1500. So, almost 1500. The thing is, all of my bad overclocking Maxwell cards, I say bad, because I know people like to defend Nvidia, and they like to say, oh, well, it's higher than what the box advertises. Let me tell you something about what Nvidia advertises on that box. It is bullshit. Sorry for the cuss word, but it's BS. If your Nvidia card only boosts to what is shown on the box, you got bad airflow, right? Like your card's hot, right? The only possible way, like if your card, man, I'm about to grab my phone right now and see what the 980 Ti, here I got my phone. We're gonna see what the 980 Ti is supposed to boost up to. It's an EVGA water hybrid, so EVGA hybrid 980 Ti. All right, here it is, and mine goes up to 1490, 1493 or 92, 90. It's the low 1490s. All right, where is? Normally they do a pretty good job of telling. There we go. Base clock 1140. Yeah, boost clock 1228. Right? That's what's on the box for this card. 1228 megahertz. In reality, mine goes up to 1490 something. Okay? On a bad day, on a bad, horrible, terrible day, I have never seen a Maxwell card actually go down to 1228. All right, that number on the box is a BS number. All right, your Nvidia card from the Maxwell and Pascal generation, I can't speak to the generations prior like Kepler. I didn't use them. Well, I did, but I didn't pay attention back then. All right, so if you have Pascal or you have Maxwell, it's never really going to be at what the box says unless you have a problem. And even then, that number is so BS, and there are so few cards that will play at that low number that really it's almost like an excuse for Nvidia to stick you with a lemon. All right, let me give you an example. Let's say Toyota makes a new engine for their cars, and it works exactly like these GPUs work in the performance range. And Toyota says you're going to get a minimum of 30 miles to the gallon with this car. But hey, if you get a good one, if your Toyota is a good overclocker, then you might get 45 miles per gallon, right? 50 miles per gallon. So let's say you and your friends and your buddies and people on the internet and your family, you know, various people who buy these Toyotas, and most of them, Toyota advertises that it should be a 30 mile per gallon car, but most people you know are getting 38 miles per gallon. You personally, you're getting like 41 miles per gallon, but you know a guy at work, he's getting 50 miles per gallon. And Toyota can get away with having all these wildly differently performing cars by saying, hey man, you'll get at least 30 miles a gallon. But Toyota knows that like the small percentage of the cars that only get 30 miles per gallon, they're faulty, right? I mean, they're not 100% garbage, but they're kind of lemons. All right, they are performing below spec. If you ask me, I've used 6 Pascal cards. I would say the minimum clock speed a Pascal card should be advertised for is 1800 megahertz. So let's look up. I have a GTX 1070 for the win. GTX 1070 for the win. And it always stays above 2000 megahertz. But let's go ahead and see what it's advertised at. All right, so let's go look. What is the clock speed on the box? The clock speed on the box advertised, the boost clock, the base clock is 1607. If your Pascal card is at 1607, kill yourself. All right, so that's 2 bad things I said in this video. I'm sorry. and I don't edit my videos, so I'm stuck with this. If your GTX 1070 is at a 1607 megahertz clock, you have a dud. All right? Or you have like no fans in your case or something. Okay? You have disabled the cooling on your card if you're at 1607. All right, so the boost clock advertised is 1797. The worst Pascal card that I have ever used, which is my Zotac Amp 1070, and maybe you get a good Zotac Amp 1070, good for you, but the worst one I've ever used, still at 80 something degrees, at like 83 degrees, is about 1900 megahertz, and I consider that to be my worst Pascal card. So these numbers, I've never seen a Pascal card only boost to 1797, right? You got a bad one. So when these YouTubers and Nvidia or whatever defend this whole advertised clock frequency, it's a game. It's a sham. The real expected frequency for Pascal cards to perform at, like for the crappy ones, is 1800 megahertz. And I'm telling you that as somebody who's used 6 different cards across 1080p, 1440p, 4K, 60 hertz, 144 hertz, televisions, monitors, all native, hundreds of hours probably of testing now. If you got a bad one at 1800 megahertz, and yet all of them are advertised to perform under 1800 megahertz, right? All of them. So it's a BS number, and I'm so tired of it getting used to defend Nvidia. It's a BS number, all right? Like, the real number that you should expect out of a Pascal card is minimum 1800, minimum. That, dude, that's after like 4 hours of gaming at 4K, all right? 1800 is the minimum you should expect. And then I would say reasonably a 1900 boost is the minimum you should expect. Because again, all of my Pascal cards, even when they're 83, 84 degrees, and the card is saturated with heat, and the cooler can't even bring it back down to the 70s, it's so hot. Meanwhile, by the way, my EVGA for the Win card, that can stay in the 70s like all day. But, you know, you look at my Zotac and it can climb into the 80s. You look at my Founders cards, those can climb into the 80s. So, even if you have a dud of a Pascal card, the boost should still be at 1900, maybe just below it. But they don't advertise that, man. They advertise below 1800. The advertisement on the box, I guarantee you, is below the real spec. And Nvidia knows this. And the problem is, Nvidia's cards beat the crap out of AMD's cards. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do, man? Like, what are you going to do to protest? You're gonna go buy AMD and get lower frame rates? So here we are, we're in this position where Nvidia cards are overpriced. I've already discussed this in this video. The Nvidia cards cost too much money for what they offer, in my opinion. Alright? $720 to have for... I didn't even finish that thought earlier. So the GTX 1070, if you don't... I've got 4 of them to compare, so I know firsthand. If you've got a bad overclocker versus a good overclocker, there's a noticeable difference in how smoothly the game plays and how high you can take the settings. So, you know, for the Win, my GTX 1070 for the Win, even when it's hot and I've been playing for hours and it's over 2000 megahertz, that plays 1440p pretty well. Now, to be honest with you, if I crank the settings up too high, not even maxed out, just too high, then I'm still in a situation where the games play a little bit jittery, but they're still at least 60 FPS. But I put that Zotac card in, and it can't even get 60 FPS sometimes. It's in the 50s. So the 1070, in my mind, it can do 1440p, and it can do 1440p in 90% of all games. It does 1440p well enough. I don't think anyone can complain. But then you still have your GTA 5s, you still have your The Divisions, you still have your Witcher 3s, where, and to be fair, the 1070 can actually handle Witcher 3, but just barely. I'm talking like 58 frames per second, alright? So just barely at 1440p, not even maxed out. With settings turned down, guys. Not even maxed out. So the cards are overpriced. And I got into this big rant at the end of this video here because so many YouTubers are defending Nvidia, and it's BS for them to do it. You show me somebody who has a Pascal card that only performs as well as the box says it will perform, and I'm telling you that person's got a bad card. And Nvidia is getting away with advertising like lemon specs, and they can get away with it because it's not like you can go to AMD. I don't know, maybe I'm not doing a good enough job. It's got to be 3 in the morning by now at least. Actually, I've got a phone. 3:30, 3:24 in the morning. Oh, there's a time there in the corner of the TV. I can't see it because the camera's in my way. But there you go. Those are my feelings on 4K gaming in 2016. I think a water-cooled Titan XP would just barely get the job done without having the fan up so loud that it makes me want to throw the computer. I don't have the money to buy one. I mean, I guess if I didn't buy all those 1070s to test for this channel, I could, but you know what I'm saying, guys. You know what I'm saying. Then it's still ridiculous. It's like, you want to game at 4K and just barely game at 4K at 60 frames per second in all the games that you like to play. Here's a card that costs $1,200. What a ripoff! Oh, and then you got to water cool it. So if it gets to a point where there is a Titan XP hybrid, it's going to cost more than $12. And if it gets to a point where you put the hardware on it to water cool it yourself, it's more than $12. So I'm not satisfied with where we are in 2016. I'm disappointed. Everybody wants to give Nvidia a pass because I get it, man. You know, when you look at it like this, the GTX 1060, the 60 series card, is about as good as a 980. So you got a 60 series card as good as the last 80 series card. And then the 70 series card, the 1070, is about as good as a Titan X or a 980 Ti. So when you look at it from that perspective, Nvidia is doing great. But when you look at it from the perspective of how much money you have to pay to game at 60 FPS in a resolution higher than 1080p, it becomes frustrating. Now, I personally think the GTX 1060 is also overpriced. However, I can recommend it. It's not a fortune. All right, it's about $300, and it gives a very good 1080p experience. It's not perfect. It's not. I don't know how future-proof it is, because there's already, like Deus Ex Mankind Divided, I have settings turned down to be playing in the 70 frames per second range, and then it dips below 70 at times. And that's with settings down. It's not like it's maxed out. So the 1060, it's good. I'm not going to say it's a home run, but it's good. But the 1070, it disappoints me, because look, if you play at 1080p, the 1070 is a good card, right? You can max out almost any game. Not all of them, though. There are games you cannot max out in 1080p with that 1070 and keep 60 frames per second. But if you play at 1080p, the 1070, it's actually a solid card. If you play at 1440p, 90% of games, it's really good. It's really solid. But then there are big blockbuster games, huge games, that it struggles with. It is on the cusp. Like if they made it 15% stronger, it would be fine. And I would pay the 450 to 525 or whatever high prices it is to have a 1070. I forget what the actual retail is off the top of my head. I guess I could look it up, but now I'm afraid that, honestly, I'm afraid my memory card's going to fill up because I've been talking so long. Well, how much is this 1070 for the win that we're looking at right here? $440. All right, so I had that pricing off. $440 right now on Amazon. I'm not going to cross shop it because this video is too long. $440 for 1070. That's a lot of money for 1080p, in my opinion. You're asking someone to pay a lot of money for 1080p. For 1440p, if it was 15% stronger, if my games would not dip below 60 FPS, and remember, I don't even max the games out. At 1440p, I would pay the $440. I wouldn't say it's the price I'd want to pay. I'd want to pay less, but I would pay it. And I wouldn't complain, right? I wouldn't complain. But when you're going to charge me $440 and it's still, it's on the cusp of doing what I need it to do at 1440p, but it's not fully doing it, I start getting offended. And then when I have to pay $650 to get a 1080, $650 to get a 1080, and finally have 1440p be more or less mastered, and it's not even really mastered, you know what I mean? There's some games where it's not that high of a frame rate, it's just, well, at least you're above 60 FPS now for sure. Then the 1080 is really expensive for a 1440p card in my mind. $650 in 2016. That's pretty expensive. You can get a whole 4K TV. This 4K TV that you're looking at right now costs less money than my GTX 1070. It's a 4K TV. It's a decent one. You can look it up. Anyway, I just had the battery indicator come on. Like, the memory card's going to run out, or the battery's going to die. I think the cards are overpriced. I think defending Nvidia based on the number on the box is BS. I think 4K is viable with a 1080. I think a lot of people would be happy enough. Alright? But you want me to play Mankind Divided at the lowest settings and still not even get 60 FPS? I'm not down for that. So for me, 4K, I think most people could get a 1080 and actually be happy. And especially if you're just like an Overwatch player and you play that non-stop. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could be a seriously happy person. And if you play older games like Skyrim or Saints Row 4 or BioShock Infinite, it's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. But you want to play these new titles, the new, modern, hot AAA titles, the open world games and such, then we're not there yet. So there you go. There's a whole lot of commentary on 4K gaming, Nvidia, the graphics card industry as a whole, and there's been some demonstrations. Hopefully this video has been useful for you. This has been AI Gaming 1776. I guarantee not everyone's going to agree with the things I've said in this video. Every time that I've complained about Pascal cards, those are the only videos I get. Like, most of my videos do not get dislikes. They get some, but whenever I complain about Pascal, you guys bury those videos in dislikes. Like, I got 150 plus dislikes on a video where I complained about my 1070. Alright, I'm not even kidding. 150 dislikes. That's the most dislikes I've ever had, ever. Yeah. So I get it. Not everyone's going to agree with this, but I don't feel that I'm wrong. And I feel like if these cards cost less money, or if they were just a little bit more powerful, then, you know, my complaints would go away. So thanks for watching, guys. Check my channel out. There's a ton of stuff on this channel. There is a ton. I do AMD, Intel, AMD, Nvidia. I do ITX, mid-tower, water-cool, air-cool. I do a lot, guys. So check it out. Tell your friends. Please like and subscribe. All that jazz. Thanks for staying up with me. and this video is probably going to take forever to upload. And again, I greatly hope you've enjoyed this video, and have yourselves a fantastic day. Again, this has been AI Gaming 1776. The current channel is called AI Politics 2 because I never thought the channel would take off. I had some videos on it and it accidentally became popular. So I'm kind of stuck with that name for now, but we'll get it sorted out. The channel currently is AI Politics 2, but I'm calling myself AI Gaming 1776 for the purpose of this video, and you can check me out on Twitter there too, AI Gaming 1776, where I give a lot of my shoot from the hip thoughts on that Twitter. Alright, so if you read me saying one thing one day, I might say something different another day. It's shoot from the hip, it's shoot first, ask questions later, just sharing my raw thoughts on that Twitter feed. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Have yourselves an excellent day. Thank you so much. Alright, check you out later.